Before we begin the presentation, I'd like to begin by acknowledging and paying my respects to the Wurundjeri people, who are the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm joining this meeting from today. And I would also like to acknowledge and pay my respects to the traditional custodians of all the places from which people are joining this meeting today. And I would also like to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. Tonight's guest speaker is Dunn. She's an urban farmer from Melbourne, specialising in indigenous plants, and she's joining us as part of our Biodiversity Month program, in which we at Farmwall are holding various events and workshops to promote urban biodiversity and highlight our role as urban farmers in promoting biodiversity, and also start discussions with members of our community about what their role can be to help promote biodiversity. So with that, I'll pass it to Hilary, and I'll also share my screen with her presentation. So take it away, Hilary.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to tonight's talk. I would like to start off with native edible gardening. Tonight, I have a very big interest in edible gardening, but natives plus edible, it's just a great combo. It's a good place to start if you're unsure where to garden. Do you want to do the next screen for me? Patrick? Oh, I didn't know that there were all these effects. Great. So there's a few reasons why I really enjoy gardening with natives. For starters, there's perennial growth. So instead of having to, buy seeds, pot them up, prick them out and put them in the garden, you actually just get plants that product year after year. And it's kind of a bit less effort, which is my cup of tea. A bit lazy when it comes to gardening. So it's really, really good. It's great for the soil health. It's great because you're not taking plants in and out all the time. So you kind of get a bit more ground cover. And then you also kind of look after the birds, the bees and the wildlife. So we kind of end up with a lot more habitat created through these natives. Obviously, if you plant with indigenous natives, it's even better for the local environment. But if there are a lot of edible foods that come from Queensland and northern New South Wales and Western Australia also. And all of these plants are still quite beneficial for our native wildlife. The flavours that we get from all of the bush foods are actually really cool, and I really like playing with them. I have a bit of a history kind of working in hospitality and food and all of that sort of stuff. And the flavours that you get from native foods is just something that you just don't really get anywhere else. So it's quite unique, which I love. There's also, I don't want to push on this too hard, but it is lower water use. It's not low water use. You still have to water your plants. However, it is a lot lower than your normal edible garden. You might need to water every day during summer, whereas an edible garden probably once a week or so. A native edible garden, sorry, probably once a week or so. So a lot less, and they usually tell you when they need watering, depending on the plant. There's also way less fertilising you have to do because they're just way more adapted to Australia's climate, so and soils. So you probably only really need to fertilise once a year, which is pretty low maintenance compared to your normal garden. There's also less likelihood of becoming weed species. So a lot of our edible gardens, you walk around the streets and you'll always find things that have been planted for edible purposes that have just become weeds. We don't really want that, ideally. So they're a point of difference, so they're fun, they look interesting, and also they're just exceptionally good for you. There's so many amazing edible foods that are high in zinc, magnesium, lutein, which is really great for your eyesight, all those sorts of, the list is much bigger than that, but I'm not a chemist. So, but they are really, really good for you, which is great. Patrick, I'll grab the next slide if I can. Oh gosh, that's really tiny. My apologies. I essentially tried to make a quick list for everybody that was kind of shade, full sun, part sun and all of that, but it hasn't really worked. But I'll just quickly run you through some of them. The other thing I really love about native gardens is that your usual edible garden really needs a lot of sun, 6 to 12 hours of sun a day. Whereas a native garden, there's actually a lot of edible foods that come from rainforest areas. And so they're kind of a little more staged. And so you can have things that grow in full shade, part shade, and full sun. So they're a little more versatile in terms of their growing conditions. They don't need to have 6 to 12 hours. So that's pretty exceptional. In terms of shade plants, there's a few really great ones. There's your river mint, your prostrantheras, which are your mint bushes, which I will talk about in a bit, your alpinia, which is your native ginger, and your mountain pepperberry. They're all quite tolerant of shade, varying levels, but they are all quite tolerant of shade. Part sun, so like protected areas, you've got lemon myrtle and appleberry, so they don't need a lot of sun, they just need a bit. And then you've got your full sun, which is salt bushes, Geraldton waxes, and warrigal greens. There are also plants that you can put on your balcony. If you're like me and you live in rental properties, you really kind of want some potted things that you might not have a garden that you can establish really well. And so those things are kind of native gingers, river mints. Finger limes are really great in pots. The appleberry will also grow in pots, warrigal greens, and a mountain pepperberry. Yeah, so they're just some ideas of different ways that you can grow them. We'll move to the next one.
I might bring it over because I can't see it.
Awesome. Okay, so the first plant, so I'll just give you an idea of how I've decided to do this. I've just picked a few of my favorites. I'm not going to run you through everything. And the reason is that I'm quite lazy and I'm quite impatient. And so I kind of really want plants that are going to produce most of the year round or that fit into difficult positions. So I tried to cover those plants today. So your Bacchausia citridoria, which is commonly known as lemon myrtle, is a really excellent plant because you can use the leaves. So you don't need to wait for a fruit. So it's all year round. You can, and it's incredibly versatile. I think I probably use it the most out of everything. So I'll start with kind of what it needs. It really, really likes a well-drained, so not really boggy soil. So if you water the soil and it doesn't really go through, if it just pools, it's not going to be a great spot for it. But if the water filters through, you know that that's well draining. It's part sun position. It really doesn't like frost. So I don't know where everyone's from today, but if you're kind of from outside of Melbourne, you might need to provide some kind of protection from frost. So if there's lots of plants around, it might be a perfect position. However, in Melbourne, we don't really need to worry about frost too much. So, and wind. So yeah, if you can try and find a spot up near a wall, if you do get a bit of frost and you do get a bit of wind, generally somewhere near a wall will kind of keep it a bit warmer because the bricks and the materials generally hold a bit more warmth and they provide a bit more protection. So somewhere near a wall. Ideally, if you've got a garden with lots of plants underneath, just to the south of another larger tree, so a mid-story canopy, that would be a perfect place to plant a lemon myrtle. They get to about 3 meters, and yeah, they can take a bit of pruning. So if you really want to keep the height down, give them prune in summer, and that'll just keep not a huge prune, only ever take a third or less off a plant. But if you give it a bit of a prune, it'll keep it to a nice height. So you can just kind of go around. And generally, you know, if you're taking bits off as you go to make teas and whatever else you're going to cook with lemon myrtle for, then that's great. And the other thing is, if your lemon myrtle starts to go a bit yellow, it's probably in an alkaline soil, which is not ideal. So there are some products that you can use to kind of acidify your soil a little bit more. But generally, if you just compost year after year, you're going to end up with a bit more, it's going to lower the pH of the soil. So you won't end up with super acidic soil, but compost generally is quite acidic. So just keep adding compost. That really rich, broken down, humusy consistency of compost is very similar to the rainforest floor, which lemon myrtles come from. So you're really trying to mimic a rainforest as much as possible if you're going to plant a Backhausea citrifera. You can also have them in a pot, which is worthwhile saying. They will need a bit more water than most other plants, but personally, I use them so much, I think it's worth it. We'll go to the next screen, Patrick. Great. So I really, really love this plant. I think it's really, really great. The best way to kind of harvest it is, when you're doing your regular pruning, you can have fresh leaves, which are excellent. You can use them like you do bay leaves. So you can chuck them into a sauce. You can infuse milk or cream. You can infuse oil. You can infuse your tomato dish and then pull them out when it's ready to be cooked. The other way to deal with lemon myrtle is to dehydrate it. It has to be dehydrated within an hour of picking it. That's because the citral that is that really lemony flavour, that's really volatile. So if you dehydrate it within an hour of harvest and then kind of crush it all up, you can have a beautiful, just like a mixed herb kind of thing. And it's so good. I use it in the morning with my eggs. I use it in all of my dishes, just like you would a normal like parsley or oregano or thyme that's dried. So it's a really, really fun herb that you can use at any time, really, with a beautiful flavour, like this amazing lemon flavour, but way more pretty. Yeah, so that's a good one. It's also really high in antioxidants, calcium, lutein, zinc, and magnesium, if anyone's a bit of a health freak. And it's very, very good for antifungal and antimicrobial properties. So great herb. All right, we'll go to the next one. Oh, I forgot that I had this slide. But that's basically what I've already just kind of spoken about there. So yeah, great. We'll move to the next one. Now, this is an image of, I'll just very quickly show you, it's very hard to see, but that's actually a lemon myrtle to your left and a mountain pepperberry to your right. They grow quite well and in similar conditions to each other. So if you're going to do lemon myrtle and mountain pepperberry, they're great companions. And they're actually just underneath a tea tree, which is providing a bit of shelter, and there's a eucalyptus tree to the left. So that's a north-facing property, but they're planted on the south side of two plants that got a little bit taller. And she actually planted all of those out at the same time, but because the tall plants just really wanted to get up high, they went higher and the other ones went lower. So it's okay to kind of plant them all at the same time if you've got a large property and you're trying to create canopies. You can plant out your eucalyptus tree and your lemon myrtle at the same time and watch the eucalyptus get bigger than the lemon myrtle. Anyway, that's it. The next slide. Oh, that's just a better image, or worse image, but you get an idea of what's going up above. All right, we can move on, Patrick. Great. So the next two plants that I'm going to kind of talk about are prostrantheras. There's a rotunda folia, which is known as native oregano, and or round leaf native mint. And then there's also a incisor. So we'll start with the rotunda folia. Now, this is basically one of the most beautiful flowering plants. You can't really see from my slide there, but that beautiful purple, you can get an idea of how big that is. That's about 3 meters tall. They don't always get that big. Sorry, that's about 2 meters tall. They don't always get that big. Sometimes they stay at a meter, but it depends on how much you prune them. And so these need a lot of pruning. And if you don't prune them, they get leggy. And they'll have stuff at the top, but they'll be quite woody in the middle. The other thing is that their life doesn't, they tend to age quite quickly. So they'll cark it like within 5 to 6 years. However, if you're constantly pruning it, it actually extends the life of the plant, which is great. So we want to prune that quite regularly. So I would recommend pruning that once a year after flowering. They are quite tolerant of shady spots, which is ideal for a lot of people living in the city. I've lived in many rental properties and I always find shady spots that I just can't figure out what to do with. They will require a bit of sun, but they do tolerate, you know, mostly like a filtered light or a partly shaded spot. So on a balcony, this is perfect. It does well in a pot. And it does require some extra water in Victoria. We don't actually get enough water, but it is relatively drought hardy. So it doesn't need constant watering. It will just need a little pick-me-up throughout summer, which is great. Just keep an eye on it in those beautiful months when you're kind of outdoors a bit more, and it should be okay. Throughout winter, you really shouldn't have to water it anymore, unless it's in a pot, and then you will need to. This is really, really great for the bees and also for the lizards. They really enjoy it in this kind of dense canopy. The bees love the flowers, and the lizards kind of love living underneath all the woody bits underneath. So it's a really, really good habitat plant. It's a beautiful plant, and it's an easy to look after plant. Patrick, we'll go to the next one. So we're just going to talk about quickly how to cook with it. So I've actually got a tea right here that I've just infused a fresh leaf of with some hot water. It doesn't require much. I've just put a piece that big in, and it's really nice. It's really intense. When you oh, I forgot to mention it's really aromatic. So, but when you brush past it, you'll kind of smell it. And if you tried it straight off the bush, you'd be really grossed out because it's really mentholy and kind of intense. But infused in a tea, it's really beautiful. And you can have it as a hot tea, or you can even do, last night I had a Prostranthera incisor tea, and then it went cold and it was really, actually really delicious. So it would be really good in the summer months just to have a nice cold iced tea with a bit of this in it. It's not as sweet as regular oregano or regular mint. It's kind of a bit, like I would really use it how I would use oregano in those same dishes. So with eggplants and lamb and tomato dishes. However, it's probably not as sweet as oregano, but it's got this kind of mentholy flavour that you would like, that's a bit minty. So that's kind of why it's got the two names, which is a bit confusing, but you know, I don't make them up. If you dry them, they have better flavour retention. So yeah, just hang up a branch in your house if you've got a stable environment, whack a bit of twine around it and dry them. Otherwise, if you've got a dehydrator, that's another great way. And again, just whack it into your dishes. I haven't tried this, but I did read online that you can add it to a yogurt, which I thought was really, really interesting. And you can add that, you know, if you're having a curry or something, and have a bit of a yogurt on the side. So yeah, another fun way. All right, we'll go to the next plant. So this is the other one that I was talking about. So they look really, really similar. The flowers are almost identical. However, this one you'll notice has a little, it's not a perfectly round leaf. It's got more like little cuts in it, which is why it's called cut leaf mint bush or native thyme. It's a little prettier than the other one. So if you picked a leaf of this, it would be not as intense and a little more pretty, I guess. And so I probably prefer this in my garden, to be honest. I think it's actually a little bit of a nicer aesthetic. It's a bit smaller, but it does kind of spread out a little bit more. So this one is a bit more tolerant of really dense shade. So if you've got a tough spot, this is a better option than the one I mentioned before. But again, it'll deal with a pot and the same care instructions. You just have to stay on top of the pruning and watch it bloom. It's in bloom right now. So I took that photo yesterday. So these are right in this beautiful pop of color right now, which is really, really lovely. Whatever you do, if it's in a shady spot, just make sure it's a well-draining shady spot. They don't like wet feet. So again, try the drainage test. If you put water on your soil and it doesn't drain through, then that means that it's probably not ideal for you. If you really are set on having this and it's poor drainage, put it in a pot or create a mound. So if you've got poor draining soil, create a mound of soil that's quite wide and quite high, and then plant into that, and that'll help the drainage. I can't guarantee it'll work, but I have done it a few times and it's worked a treat for me. So yeah. So ways to cook this, which are on the next screen. They again make a tea. This is the beautiful photo of it in bloom. It's just gorgeous. It pairs pretty similar to the other dishes. You know, pop it on a pizza. It's kind of got a bit more of a minty flavor than the other one. So it's really good in like chocolate chip cookies or ice cream or something like that if you want to play around a little bit. And you can have it on with like a lamb dish, or if you're vegetarian, pop it in with an eggplant, and it's really delicious. The flowers can be eaten, but I'm not a big fan, so that's just me. All right, we'll go to the next plant. Oh, this is one of my favorites. So this Billarderia, I can never pronounce it, Billarderia scandens, or appleberry, which is a lot easier to say, is basically this amazing climber, which is a light climber. It's not a heavy climber. So, you know, if you think of wisteria or ivy or anything like that, that really like takes over other plants, this will very lightly twine its way up plants, which is great. It's a really beautiful, it's indigenous to Victoria, which is important. Oh, sorry, I should mention that the last two plants were also indigenous to Victoria, which means that they're better for the habitat around this area, which is exciting. They get to generally about these climb to about 3 meters tall. They will tolerate frosts. I think they go down to -14 degrees they tolerate. And they tend to, in their native wild habitat, grow underneath eucalyptus trees and kind of clamber up the side. So if you've got a tough eucalyptus tree in your garden, this is a great one for it. They also tolerate anything from full sun to full shade. However, if you are trying to get fruit on these and quite an abundant harvest, you are probably looking at the best conditions possible, which will be a well-composted soil and morning sun and afternoon shade. And you will need to keep this well watered. It will tolerate absolutely like next to nothing in terms of water, but for the food purposes that we're focused on today, you will need to water it. Not a lot, just throughout the summer months, every couple of weeks. Yeah, you can grow this like in a narrow spot. So if you had a driveway or something like that, and you're not so interested in the fruits and it's a bit shaded up the side bit, this will grow really well. So yeah, it's also important for honey eaters. So oh goodness me, what is the bird? it'll come to me. But there's a really, really, eastern spinebill, really beautiful native bird here in Victoria, and they really love this plant. They kind of flutter around it, and their beak can get through the, you can kind of see in the photo just in the distance, it's like a bell-shaped flower. So they really love the nectar from the flowers there. It is worth mentioning that this has a rare status according to Vic Flora, which means that the more of us that can get these plants in our gardens, the better it is for everyone, for wildlife, and for just creating corridors. So yeah, it is really important to kind of consider those things when we're putting plants in our gardens. We really want to encourage as much the kind of indigenous and native things as possible, because we are living on the land that once upon a time was bushland. So yeah, if we can benefit both sides, it's great. In saying that, however, the possums will really love your fruit. So if you really want to harvest fruit from them, it might be worth putting a net around it just during fruit time and then taking it off again afterwards. And obviously leaving the flowers to do their thing. So as soon as flowering is finished, put a net over it, and then you've got a nice harvest. We can go to the next slide now. But if you shake this tree, the berries should just fall off. And that's when you know that they're ready. I have tried one when it wasn't ready, and they're absolutely revolting. So don't eat them until they kind of fall off the tree when you give it a bit of a shake. They've got a bit of a purple hue to them, or like purpley red hue up the side when they're ready to go. So they're two indicators. They should be flowering right now. Actually, I've got a little photo. I've got a real one right here. So I don't know if you can see this, but that's my appleberry right there. This is a brand new pup, so I'm just about to pop him in my garden. But they're in flower right now, which means that they will be ready for summer harvest. That's give or take. Every plant is different, but generally they're ready in summer. You can eat them fresh. They're pretty delicious. They kind of taste appley, but with a hint of kiwi fruit, which is honestly what everybody says, but it's very hard to describe them any other way. You can also chop them up and roast them, which means that you can add them to a dessert. You can add them on top of like a little bit of ice cream or something. Or you can just add them to like a nice salad for a bit of a fruity, crunchy flavour. Usually I pop them in with my green salads and off I go. So yeah, that's a fun one that's indigenous, which is great. We'll go to the next veggie. Cool. So this one's river mint, which is also indigenous. This is very tolerant of pretty much all conditions. This is a photo I took yesterday. It tastes mentholy. It's beautiful. You'd use it like you would normal mint, but it's native, and it grows just down by the Yarra River. So if you're local to, I'm in Northcote, so if you're local to this area, you can go for a bit of a stroll and you might even spot it underneath some trees. So it grows well in an understory. So usually I'd pop this kind of around the edge of your garden. So it's like a bit of a border because it smells so pretty, but also it'll grow underneath other things. So you can, if you're kind of looking for that staged garden rainforest feel, this is a great understory. It does spread kind of like normal mint, not as heavily, but it will spread. So if you really want to contain it, maybe pop it in a pot and then put the pot into the ground. But yeah, you'll need to keep an eye on it to make sure it doesn't take over your garden. It tolerates dry periods and it tolerates wet periods. So because it grows near the river, it really likes wet feet and dry feet, either or. So this is a really, really hardy plant. You can basically put it anywhere. You know, full shade, full sun, full wet, full dry, doesn't really matter. It'll just keep going. Great for the bees and the insects. And you can even, if you've got a frog bog, you can pop it in like on the edge, kind of as the frog bog goes up, you can pop it on the edging of the frog bog, which is great. It is important to remember that this, you know, it can keep growing throughout the winter months, but if it's looking a bit scraggly, just cut it back to the ground and it'll just pop back up again. So yeah, super, super easy to go. Patrick, how are we going for time?
We've been going for, I'd say about 30 minutes all up. We do schedule these for 45 minutes and try and squeeze in a few questions at the end, but it's an amazing presentation so far. So love the flow. No reason to stop it at the moment. Okay.
All right. Let me know when we should. So in terms of river mint, it's, you know, I don't really need to tell you how to cook with it because it's pretty basic. It's just like normal mint. In terms of savoury dishes, you know, whack it in with some gnocchi and some asparagus and some peas. Why not? It's really nice and fresh. You can make a potato salad with it. You can make any salad with it. You could do a fruit salad. You could pop it in as a garnish or make a mojito out of it. You could do, you know, some kind of chocolate dessert. But more importantly, you can make a tea, which I know is the theme of the night. But it is just so great being able to go out into your garden, chop some things off and make some fresh teas. It's really beautiful. They've got really incredible medicinal uses. So they were traditionally used for colds and flus, like normal kind of minty things were. So they're really great. They're really medicinal. Those chocolate brownies that I've got on the slide are from SBS, which I thought was really cool. So I'm going to try that next week. But if anyone wants the recipe, it is on the, I popped the little link down there. Great. Patrick, we'll go to the next one. Oh, this is my favorite, but it's also one of the hardest ones to get, which I know is a bit of a stitch up, so I apologize. But you can eat the whole plant, which is so exciting, and it's really, really good for you. So the native ginger basically grows in full shade. Like, it is so tolerant of shade, it's not even funny, which means that for most of you with small properties, this is a great addition to your garden that you can also eat. It is also a great addition to your home because you can have it indoors. So this native ginger basically, it won't flower or fruit indoors, but that's okay because you can use the leaves and you can use the rhizomes. So if you're lucky enough to find a nursery, and I've got a link to all the nurseries in this slide as well. So if you are lucky enough to get one and you've got a shady spot, please by all means grab it. They do get quite tall. They get to about 1 metre. So if you're going to kind of have it indoors, might not get to a metre, but it will get tall. So I'd probably layer it. So I'd have the alpinia and then something a bit lower and something a bit lower, and kind of have 3 pots together to kind of give it some support. But yeah, it likes a shady spot. It does need to be kind of a bit moist, so keep the water up if you can. It will tolerate fairly dry conditions, but it will die if you totally neglect it. So try and keep an eye on it in the drier months. And it doesn't really like wind or frost. So down the side of a house is really great option. However, if you get a bit of a wind tunnel, it might not be so good. And that's because it's so tall. So if you can kind of put something in front of it, like a plant, or find some way to protect it from the wind so it doesn't just totally knock it over and snap branches off, then that'd be great. It does tolerate some frosts. However, it'll damage the leaves. So if that does happen, what you can do is you can chop it down to the ground and it'll just chill out until summer or spring and then pop back up again. However, in saying that, if the frost is really, really heavy, it'll freeze the ground, which will freeze the rhizome and it'll kill it off. So depending on where you live, if you just get a touch of frost, then this one will survive. It just won't look very pretty in those months, but that's fine. It's got really pretty smelling flowers, which is always a plus. We all like pretty smelling gardens. And if you compost and mulch well, it should protect it from the frost if you do live in a partially frosted area. And it'll also create this really nice forest floor conditions, which is its natural habitat. So you'll get a lusher, healthier plant. Great, next slide. So this is cool. There's a few different ways that you can use this. The berries are ridiculously good for you. They're quite sour and they do taste a bit weird, but they're really worth trying if you can get your hands on some. I haven't quite figured out a use for them yet. I just kind of eat them by themselves, but I'm sure that there are some great ways of eating them. If you dig out some of the roots from the outside edge, so because it's a rhizome, I don't know how many of you know what that means or not, but basically it's like a big long tube that grows under the ground, and it'll just kind of keep extending. And so if you just pick out the edge, so pick the size that you'd like your plant, and then like go to the edge of the plant and chop some of that edge bit off with a spade. And then you can pull that out of the ground. Don't pull the whole plant out because it'll damage it. But if you just cut into it with a spade and pick out like a little side bit, you can chop it up and use it like ginger, which is great. The small shoots are a little sweeter, so that's probably, it's the pinky younger bit that looks like it's just about to shoot up. They're the best parts, and so they're really delicious. And you can use them, you know, stir fry. I don't really need to tell you how to use ginger, but my housemate the other day used ginger in a sweet treat, which I thought was really amazing and a really good way to use ginger, and very good for you also. So you can investigate how to use gingers in your sweet desserts if you're interested, or even make some cocktails with ginger. So it's very, very versatile. The last way that, and like I said, I like to be able to use the whole plant because it means that I get the most out of my edible garden. If you take a leaf and pop whatever you're steaming in it, whether it be vegetables or fish or some other kind of, I don't know what else you can steam, but if you're steaming things, you can just pop them in a leaf and you'll get a bit of a flavour. So yeah, that's a bit of a steamed gingery flavour through it. Yeah, so lots of fun ways to use that one. All right, we'll go to the next one. Oh, I know I said that one was my favourite, but this one's pretty great too. Gelatin wax flower, what a unique flavour. It's pretty cool. It's beautiful. Now, it's important to note the name of this, Unsanitam, because that is the one that you can eat. There are varieties that you can't eat. But yeah, they get to about 4 meters by 4 meters. That is very large, and I think if you prune them quite rigorously, so every single year you keep pruning them, you're never going to get a plant that big. So don't worry about that too much. They're heat and drought tolerant. They tolerate full sun, and they will tolerate part shade. They don't need too much water. They might need a little bit in summer again, but they really don't need a lot of water because they're kind of succulent-y, and so they hold water in their leaves. And they're really, really good for the birds and the bees as well because they've got these big flowers that are just totally open and have heaps of nectar, which is great. If you live by the coast, these are a perfect plant for you. They tolerate sand and they tolerate frost. So absolutely incredible plant. They're long flowering and they're a fast growing shrub, which is, you know, what we all want to hear. So these will also do really well in a pot. As long as you have a sunny spot, these will do really, really well in a pot. So they're a fun one. Go to the next slide. So these I would use with seafood traditionally. I just take a few leaves and I kind of whack them on top of my steamed fish, and they've got this kind of citrusy, eucalyptusy flavour, I suppose you could say, which is so, it's like a little bit, because it's kind of like a succulent, you bite and it's kind of crunchy, and then it's got this really pretty citrusy flavour. And so I'd put that on top of my fish, and you just kind of eat it, and it's so beautiful. The first time I ever tried this was at a Melbourne restaurant that did an amazing job of garnishing their food with it, and it blew my mind, and from that day on I've just loved it. So yeah, you can garnish meat or chicken, probably not meat so much, to be honest, but I would do chicken with it. I would put the leaves in a salad, so as you're eating your salad you just get this like little burst of flavor. And the other one that is really fun is just blitz it with some olive oil and some salt, and then make a bit of a herb oil salsa verde type thing. And then you just drizzle that over whatever you're eating that might go with a citrus flavor. And it is becoming quite popular in cocktails, which is fun. So you can kind of garnish your cocktail with it, or you can stir it down with vermouth. I know that they use it quite often in gins now as well, which is great. So plenty of uses for it. And again, because it's so pretty, it doesn't just have to be an edible plant. It can also be a beautiful addition to your garden. Apparently you can eat the flowers. Again, I didn't love them. So you can, but why bother when you've got such beautiful leaves? Cool. Gosh, we're really going over time here. Sorry. Finger limes.
Hilary, I'll just stop you there. That's completely fine.
Yeah.
Anyone that needs to leave, I'll just mention that we record these seminars and we upload them to our ecosystem network. So those of you who are coming from ecosystem, if you need to leave, you can find the recording later. And then if you're not from ecosystem, you can email the email address attached to the Eventbrite, and I can send you a link to the recording if you need to leave now. But yeah, like I said before, the presentation is sensational. So happy to kick on with it, and then we'll have questions at the end. Yeah,
great. I think this is the last plant anyway, so not too much longer. Finger limes, now there are so many different varieties of finger limes that you can get, so it's worth doing some research. You can get just you can get ones that aren't grafted, and you can get ones that are grafted. So it's worth kind of doing your research as to what you'd like. Some are more citrusy, some are more floral, all sorts of different flavor notes that you can get from them. So yeah, have a bit of fun, and I recommend going out and researching what you like. They also flower and fruit at different times. So I've got an everbearing, which means that it kind of fruits from summer through to autumn. Apparently, I haven't had any fruit off them yet because I only purchased it a year and a half ago, and so I'm still waiting for my fruit. So they usually fruit within 2 to 3 years. And they will do with a full sun to dappled shade position. So again, they're kind of, they traditionally grow up north, where they live in kind of rainforesty areas. So yeah, they will tolerate a bit of a sheltered spot, and they will need supplementary watering. I don't water them as much as I water my citrus trees. Surprisingly, they don't seem to need it, so I haven't really bothered, but I do just give them a little splash of water from time to time, especially through the summer months. When about now, actually, springtime, I give them a once a year fertilizer, and I've noticed that mine got quite dense, so I've had to prune bits out to kind of allow some kind of airflow. They do have a habit of kind of getting quite caught up in itself, so try and kind of open it up a little bit, and you should get a bit more airflow and less likely, less diseases and more opportunity for the plant to fruit as well. So yeah, that's a fun one. Now, in terms of eating these, as you can see from this image, you've got all of these little juicy segments that are full of flavour. Now, they've also got little pips. So I'd probably cut them. Actually, before I cut them, I would grate them because the zest is really useful in cooking. You can use it for all sorts of things. Yeah, someone said vegan caviar alternative. Absolutely. probably a little more zingy and a little more sweet than caviar, but yeah, very, very, very cool. An interesting flavour, totally worth investigating. Yeah, they're kind of, so you try and scoop out as many of those little caviar bits, to use that word, but keep in mind that there are tiny little seeds in there that you don't really want to get, and they're kind of annoying to pick out. So Julie from Peppermint Ridge taught me this, which is a wonderful trick. You just kind of scoop it out over a chopping board and get a wet knife, and you kind of separate out the seeds if you're cooking with them. It is quite time consuming, but honestly, once you try them, you'll realize that it's worth it. So they do freeze. So they usually live in the fridge, or they can store for up to 5 to 6 weeks, and you can freeze them, but I recommend making sure that your freezer is at a higher temperature than -8 degrees. They are prone to frost issues. So yes, they're amazing in gin and tonics. So great, thanks, Candy. Cool, we'll go to the next slide, which is just that image just shows you the range of fruit, colours and flavours that you can get. Each of those will have a totally different flavour profile, which is really amazing. They're really spiky, so they're really good habitat plants for birds and things, because kind of creates a bit of a protection from other birds that might be kind of aggressive or predatory. But for that reason, I would recommend actually planting them. If you're going to do a food forest or something along those lines, try and plant them on the outside of your forest and not on the inside. You don't want it too close to the pathway, but you also don't want it too like dense in amongst your garden, because it's going to make it really, really difficult to harvest them. So you kind of want to have it somewhere where you can access it. And I recommend wearing some pretty hardcore gloves, like some welding gloves, because they can get quite prickly. And they're basically just ready when you shake the tree. And so you kind of give it a bit of a shake, and some will fall off, and then you wait for a bit, and they'll just, you'll get a couple of weeks worth of harvesting from them. Yeah, they freeze, I've already mentioned that. Yeah, so yeah, really, really good for, fish is a general recommendation, but they can be used on all sorts of other things as well. And yeah, cocktail garnish as well. Love our cocktails, especially in lockdown. Cool. All right. I think that's it for all of the plants. But Patrick, if we go to the next slide, I just kind of want to talk very quickly on planting advice, because I find that is a bit of a hard one for a lot of people. In terms of native plants, the best time to plant them is either now, but preferably would be in autumn, because you get more water and also more time before the harsh summer months. So if you can plant them in autumn, that's great. But if you're feeling really motivated right now is a really good time to buy some plants. You want to kind of dig a plant about twice as big as the pot, deep and wide, and then I just backfill it. And I generally just put a little bit of compost. If you don't have compost, don't worry about it. But I do find that, especially for the rainforest plants, it does a good job of letting those fragile roots kind of adapt to its new environment. And then, every year I would put a layer of compost and then a layer of mulch on top. So composting, mulching time would have been winter, because it allows it enough time to kind of break down before the summer months, but also it's, protects it from the heat and all of that sort of stuff. So yeah, I'd probably do like very end of winter, but you could also mulch and compost now. It's just also hard doing mulching as it gets a bit warmer, which is my preference for doing late winter, because it's just too hot later. So if you can do it the cooler months, it's better for you too. Most native plants don't really love phosphorus, as most of you probably already know. So I generally just don't bother with manure, because some of them do have higher phosphorus, some of them don't, but just don't bother. It's not really worth it. Blood and bone is really all you need. And if you compost regularly, you might not even need blood and bone. Depends on your soil. So Yeah, if you've got nice lush soil, adding compost and mulch every year should be enough. But if you're feeling like your plants need a bit of a revitalise, some compost, and I always recommend sea soil, especially around the time of planting. Actually, after you've just planted your plants, give them a nice sea soil in, and that will just give them a bit of a fresh start. Again, if you don't have it, a good water of just water should be enough, really. But I do find that sea soil does help. Next slide. Oh, cool. So this is just a general upkeep list. Autumn, plant and prune. So you only ever want to take a third of any plant off at a time. So I think a really good way to do it would be take, you know, a third off, a third off, a third off until you kind of get your plant at the right size and shape. And then from there on, you just kind of need to tip prune it. That was a tip from Julie at Peppermint Ridge. She's excellent and has great advice. And then in winter, you do look after your soil health. So you want to compost and mulch it, get it ready for the warmer months. And then in spring, you want to fertilise. So you can use blood and bones, sea soil, any slow release fertiliser pellets. There are some native ones as well. But just try and make sure that whatever you put on there in terms of fertilising is less than 3% phosphorus, just to make sure that you're not burning anything. And then in summer, all you have to do is really keep the watering maintenance up and harvest. I didn't write that, but a lot of these things might need harvesting in summer. Yeah, I think that's, next screen. There are a few problems, and the main problem I would like to mention is that they get kind of woody and sparse. So try and prune them. I'd probably recommend pruning them more than you would prune other non-native plants. Natives just tend to get quite leggy. And once they're woody, they're really hard to come back from. So if you just stay on top of the pruning, then you'll have nice, you'll be able to control the shape, the form, and the size, which is ideal. Another problem that people often do is that they forget to water. And they think that they're native, so they don't bother. But actually, throughout the summer months, you really need to make sure that you are watering. So just keep an eye on the soil, and if it's looking really dry and the plant's starting to wilt, just water it. That's the best advice I can give you. Try and keep that up, especially for the first year, and then after that, they should become, even the drought-tolerant plants for the first year will need watering. If you're really concerned about the fact that you've got a heavy schedule and all of that sort of stuff, and you know that there's some good rain coming, you can Google what a swale is and kind of build some swales around your garden, and that'll help hold some water in, so it might minimize some of the watering you'll need to do, but you still need to water. Poor drainage, that's another issue that a lot of people have. It's just a matter of checking that you do have good drainage before you pop the plants in. And if you don't have good drainage, then maybe raise your beds, or like I said before, plant into a mound. The wrong spot, so, you know, not enough sun or too much sun, so just be careful in that regard. And wrong soil type or pH of soil. So I recommend just checking, you know, if something says it doesn't tolerate clay soils and you have clay soils, maybe pop it in a pot instead. And the pH of the soil, most natives like acidic pH, or not acidic, but, you know, 6.5 to 7. Great, next slide. These are all just my websites, so if anyone wants to flick through, this is like, I got tons of information from some of these websites. They're all really, really useful. You can flick to the next one and the next one. These are some great books. So I've mentioned Peppermint Ridge a bit. Peppermint Ridge Farm is in Tyong North, and they're really, really excellent. They have a nursery. They do some food, like they cook and run these once-a-month sessions. And they have really great advice because they actually have a native food forest. So Julie and Anthony run the place, and they have establish the thing from scratch following permaculture principles. So yeah, they've got really good advice. They've also grown it all, so they know what's, you know, they've trialed and errored everything, which is great. And they've got a nursery, so if you're interested, it is quite far. So 5K rules, it's going to make it a bit difficult, but worth checking out outside of lockdown. For those close to Melbourne, we've got Ceres and we've got Vink, which are both really, really great places, and Bullion Arts and Gardens as well is quite close. Karanga Nursery, which is in Montrose, is beautiful. If you like natives, it's the best nursery to go to because it's so pretty. However, they don't have a huge selection of edible natives, but I thought it was worth mentioning that it's a really gorgeous nursery. Edible Eden is one online that has really, really good information. Karen Sutherland, I've heard her speak before, not purchased anything from there, but she's very, very knowledgeable and has an amazing garden of her own that she grows a lot of these things in, and then has an online store. So that's a really good one to check out. And because it's online, you can COVID purchase, which is fun. And Oz Plants, which is in Arthur's Seat, Mornington Peninsula. It's just always a fun place to go, and they've got really good natives as well. So if you're looking for a road trip at the end of this, it's a good one. Great, that's pretty much everything. These are just the mountain pepperberry photos, but it's not worth mentioning.
Sorry about that. Thank you, Hilary. That was yeah, fantastic. It was yeah, super cool. And if I could Uber Eats every single one of those plants,
I know.
then yeah, I'd be a happy man. And also all that talk about gin and tonics and cocktails has made me pretty thirsty. So
Yep.
yeah, first of all, a very big thank you. And we have gone over time, which is completely fine. If anyone has any questions that they don't have time to stick around for, then feel free to email the email address attached to the event, or to, if you're in an ecosystem, to leave a comment in ecosystem. And that's also where the recording of this presentation will be. So yeah, that's it. And I'll open it up to everyone else. If you'd like to unmute yourself and ask a question, or feel free to type a question in the chat and I can read it out.
I had a question about kind of larger fruiting plants such as Illawarra or different types of plums. Do you have any advice for that kind of edible plant in Victoria?
I do. I generally, I don't have any of them because I'm not patient enough. I do know that Peppermint Ridge has many of the Illawarra plums, and they're also selling them, and they have really good advice. So they probably have better advice than I do. However, they are, again, kind of a rainforesty plant. So they really need soft, friable, composted soil. And you need a male and a female for the Illawarra plums. And they also like a spot, so they will do okay with the northerly aspect, but they do require a little bit of shade from the harsh afternoon sun. So again, kind of try and plant it to the south of a plant if you can. Part shade spot. Yeah, and they're really. Have you tried cooking with them before, Heather? No, they're really interesting. They're not as sweet as I thought that they would be, but they're really great in jellies and jams and things. But also they're just they've got a little seed in the middle bit. So if you cut them in half and you de-seed them, and they've almost got like a jelly texture on the inside, and they've got like this strangely savory but also sweet flavor. Which is really cool. So they're great for, usually I kind of halve them and pop them into like a salad for like a little soft, juicy bite. But yeah, cooked down, stewed down. So in like a dish where you could put, or you might put like apricot or something, you could pop some of those in and just kind of have this like lovely stewed down dish. But yeah, definitely, I'm pretty sure Julie mentioned that they are the only like large scale supplier of those plants. So if you are interested, send her an email and ask her for some advice. She'd be really willing to share, and a really good place to get them from as well.
Who was that? Sorry, what was the name again?
Peppermint Ridge Farm.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
Cool. We have a couple of comments in the chat. Marissa said thanks for an excellent session, full of great info.
Right.
And Hillary said thank you, Hillary, for sharing such great info. And I think everyone was pretty impressed because Candy's asked, do you do garden consultations?
No, I don't. At the moment, I'm kind of spread quite thin. But maybe one day. If you do have some questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. So if you want to send an email through to me, my email is Hillary. Oh, actually, Elliot, are you there? Could you pop it on? Oh, I'll put it in. I'll put my email in the thing, and if anyone has any questions, I'm happy to help out. But I do have a pretty full schedule, so unfortunately, I can't consult for you. But I will help you. There you go. Anybody else have any questions? Yes, there is a Melbourne Bush Foods in Fairfield. There you go. Great. There's some really good companies out there doing some great things, which is just awesome. Once upon a time, you couldn't get your hands on these things, so it's really nice to be able to have some access. Yeah.
Hill, I might jump in. I'm looking to do a green manure / ground cover for a patch this spring and summer. Is there any ground cover that fixes nitrogen that isn't native?
Oh, that's a really good question. Not that I know of. I can think of a few ground covers, but none that are native.
Yeah, no, none came off the top of my head. That's just what I thought. Maybe.
It's worth looking into anything from the Fabaceae family, so the pea family.
Yeah.
And so if you can Google ground covers native, see what comes up. Yeah. No, can't think of anything.
Worries.
Sorry.
It's all right. Sorry to put you on the spot. In my head.
Yeah. You're probably worth not doing a native ground cover, to be honest, because you're going to pull it out. Are you not?
No, I'm not. I'm going to trim it. Just keep trimming it.
Why don't you just plant dichondra or kidney weed?
Well, I probably will. I just wanted to know if there was a native option.
Yeah. Well, no, dichondra is native. It's
It
just
is?
not nitrogen fixing. That's all.
It's a good option, actually. I might do that. I
Yeah.
might mix that with a nitrogen fixing one.
Yeah. There you go. Solution.
Best of both worlds.
Oh, a water will nitrogen fix, but it's not a ground cover. Yeah.
Okay.
Cool. Great.
If there
Anything else? Yes.
if there aren't, I see Marissa's unmuted, but Marissa, did you have a question or a comment?
No, just a thanks. Just a thanks for excellent presentation. I had no idea, none whatsoever. There are so many amazing plants, and fruits that really we should all be enjoying. Yeah.
I've only touched the surface. I only picked a really easy one. But yeah, there's a lot of variety.
Excellent. I was happy with my Warrigal greens and native raspberries, which we have a wonderful garden that Peter Rutherford has put into our Kimbriki, which is our tip. And he's planted this beautiful permaculture garden. And so I was actually just there because in our lockdown, we can still go and take stuff to the tip and enjoy his wonderful permaculture garden.
Wonderful. That's great.
I've been picking native raspberries literally on Sunday as I'm going through.
Yum.
Oh, it's wonderful.
Fantastic.
So, yeah. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. My absolute pleasure. No problem.
There was one more quick question. Maybe we can make this last question. It was from Heather in the chat, which is, where is the best place to find the native ginger?
Oh, that's a really good question. I'm actually on the hunt for one myself, and I haven't really found one. Every website that I've looked into says it's sold out. So I'm not sure. I know that Peppermint Ridge was looking at doing them for later, but they're not ready yet. And I know that I'd probably try Bullion Arts and Gardens. I haven't tried them yet, but they generally have a lot of plants, so they might have it. I'm sorry, you're going to have to do your own research there, Heather. I'm struggling also. I think it might be the time of year also. Right now is probably not an ideal time, and also we've had a pretty crap year. So yeah, if you just keep an eye out, just go on all the different websites and ask around. And yeah, Kate, great note. For anyone who's not from Melbourne who wants to know their Indigenous plants, pretty much every council these days has an Indigenous plant list. So that's how you would find out. And Indigenous nurseries are usually pretty helpful too. Cool.
Awesome. Hilary, thank you so much for that amazing presentation.
No worries.
Incredible knowledge that you've got, and thank you everyone for joining us. It's great to have a few people here to join us for presentations like this. And like I said, as always, it's recorded and it'll be uploaded to our ecosystem. And if you'd like to know anything else about our events and what's happening for Biodiversity Month, or to check out our special Biodiversity Month seed bomb kit, you can go to farmwall.com and you can find that there, and you can also explore the events page on the ecosystem, or you can search for a Farmwall in Eventbrite. So thank you everyone, and I hope you have a nice evening and a great night dreaming about native infused gin and tonics.
I will. Thanks everyone. Bye.
See ya.